make some room.
Everywhere I go, I'm in the spotlight. This is a good life. I'm living bold. This is what it looks like. On the tipping of the world.
Happy Detention and Demurrage Week. Can you say that? Can you say Happy D&D Week? Look, the comments that we've been waiting on to be due, they were due this week. The comments were due this week with the Federal Maritime Commission, and I'm trudging through them. Look, there's over 100 of them. I'm not exactly sure what the last count was, but there's over 100. We're going through it. I'm going to highlight a few here today, actually along with some other interesting news that's also been hitting this week. We're continuing along in our Captain's Log holiday series. Hi, welcome to By Land and By Sea, an attorney breaking down the week in supply chain, presented by the Maritime Professor. That's me. I'm Lauren Began, founder of the Maritime Professor and Squall Strategies, and I'm your favorite maritime attorney. Join me every week as we walk through both ocean transport and surface transport topics in the wild world of supply chain. As always, the guidance here is general and for educational purposes only. It should not be construed to be legal advice, and there is no attorney-client privilege created by this video. If you need an attorney, contact an attorney. So like the past few weeks, usually we start with our top 3 stories of the week. But this week, all the stories are top stories. Through the rest of the year, 2022 is coming to a close so quickly. Look, we're continuing on with our Captain's Log holiday series. So let's just jump right into it. So story number 1. I'm not going to start off with D&D comments because we're going to get to that at the end because I'm going to be highlighting some of those comments filed. So usually that's my first story of the week. Story number 1 of the week this week is that we are still waiting for the unreasonable refusal to deal or negotiate with respect to vessel space accommodations. Right before going on the air, I checked, I didn't see it up yet. We still have the rest of the day. So remember, this is the Ocean Shipping Reform Act of 2022 from this summer, June 16th, it was signed. It said within 6 months, this unreasonable refusal to deal or negotiate with respect to vessel space accommodations rulemaking that the FMC was directed to initiate within 30 days and conclude within 6 months. So that puts the deadline today. So December 16th. So that's it. I'm waiting on it. I'm interested to see what they came up with. There were some questions over the unreasonable refusal to deal or negotiate with respect to vessel space accommodations, kind of giving the business decisions. There was some question over what that looked like. Did it have to be a full document? Was it just kind of a catch-all so that the ocean carriers could say, well, we denied the export categorically because it was just part of our business decision. Remember, the FMC basically said, if you categorically are excluding exports, we're going to categorically call that unreasonable. Paraphrasing, obviously, there. So I'm interested to see what the final language is. This is the first of the rulemakings that we're going to see some concluding thoughts on, at least for now. I mean, this doesn't mean that the FMC can't take up issues that they still see as unresolved. But this is part of that, trying to get some guardrails on the wild, wild west that the ocean shipping world has been, right? We're moving forward. We're getting progress. So, and then, even if we get our final rule language today, that doesn't mean that it's probably going to be effective on publication. I would guess that this is not effective on publication, and we will get at least a 30-day implementation period for this, which puts us at January 16th. So it gives you about a month to kind of digest the language if the final rule text comes out today before implementation goes into effect. Maybe it'll be automatic. I don't know. Maybe it'll be 60 days. I don't know. That. We'll see. We'll see when the language gets posted what it looks like. So story number 2. So John Reiser on LinkedIn, he was mentioning Shipper's Gate or Shippergeddon, kind of a play on Steve Ferreira's Containergeddon. So he posted on LinkedIn just this week saying that he describes Shipper's Gate or Shippergeddon as when shippers do not renew contracts for fixed rates based on the standard annual contract period starting May 1st. Instead, shippers use FAK rates, while carriers and NVOCCs do all they can to win back the hearts of the shipper after squeezing every penny and dime while decreasing service levels and customer service to all-time lows. This is what John is saying. This is reading right off his post. Some shippers will renew, but those are the standard large shippers. They will demand more free time and guarantees of service levels or fine the carrier. So my reaction to this is, I think that's a pretty interesting perspective. Certainly we're seeing the pendulum switch toward shippers these days. Over the summer, I said that was probably going to happen. Honestly, I think it's going to continue to happen. It's going to be swinging toward the shippers for a while. It may shift back toward the ocean carriers for a while. We're not going to go straight back into this is our new normal. We're going to be kind of finding that pendulum swinging. So we're seeing that now. We're seeing the pendulum swing toward the shippers with the rates dropping, with kind of cost-saving measures being implemented probably on the carrier side. As these new vessels are going to be hitting the seas, that's only going to be increasing capacity, which, as we've talked about before, likely would contribute to the rates declining. I don't know. We're going to see this swing again before we level out. So I'd say don't get too comfortable here. But I've said this a lot over the past, especially few weeks. There were a lot of strained relationships over the past 2 years, and it really is all about the long game here, right? We got to come back together. There's only so many carriers. There's oodles of shippers. We're going to have to repair some of these relationships that were otherwise kind of strained or even, unfortunately, maybe broken. But for now, maybe the shippers can enjoy this shipper's gate. I don't know. I think that this is, like I said, keep it in mind, it might be swinging in your favor today. Maybe it's going to swing out of your favor tomorrow. This is an entire supply chain. We're all linked together. And really we're really all looking for is the fast, fair, expeditious movement of goods, which is essentially the FMC's mission statement, the fair and efficient movement of goods for the benefit of the U.S. consumer, exporter, and importer. That's really what we're all looking for. Even take out the U.S. side of it. The whole supply chain is really just looking for fast, efficient throughput of goods. When you make the order on your phone, you want it to be there. When you make the order on behalf of your company, you want to make sure that it's there. So look, it's all about the long game here. Just let's keep that all in mind as this pendulum keeps swinging. But interesting perspective. I thought that was interesting. The shipper's gate. Okay, so story number 3. The FMC is cracking down on retaliatory behavior. I'm not afraid to tell you here, I am so thrilled with this heavy-handed crackdown. And let me explain why. So retaliatory behavior, right? That's there's no room for that. Like I said, I'm going back to the last comment. It's the long game here. And retaliation and kind of holding goods over here because of something that's happening over there, it just doesn't always match up. And so look, the Federal Maritime Commission, specifically Chairman Dan Maffei, had some really strong words in the press release saying that all levels of ocean carriers, and really anybody in the industry, but he was kind of speaking to ocean carriers here, he was warning them that all levels of employees are now always beholden to the rules set out by the Ocean Shipping Reform Act of 2022. And that this is a quote, absolutely illegal for ocean carriers to discriminate or retaliate against a shipper for filing a complaint or challenging a charge. Let me say that again. Chairman Maffei, FMC, Federal Maritime Commission Chairman Maffei, said, quote, absolutely illegal for ocean carriers to discriminate or retaliate against a shipper for filing a complaint or challenging a charge. Filing a complaint or challenging. So Chairman Maffei continues and basically said he says, even a verbal threat will not be tolerated. This is very, very strong language and a market warning to the entire industry to basically knock it off, so to speak, on these threats or veiled threats or actual discriminatory or retaliatory language or practices. And, he says that it goes down to all levels of employees. He's saying from the CEO to the newest sales associate, everybody needs to understand that this is not going to be tolerated and that it's absolutely illegal to discriminate or retaliate against a shipper for filing a complaint or challenging a charge. Look, we're still waiting for the FMC's third and final under OSRA for now, unfair or unjustly discriminatory behavior. After these comments from Chairman Maffei, I'm almost more excited to see what that language says now. FMC is not playing around on this. They don't want any sort of monkey business. They don't want funny business. They want this to be, look, the fair and efficient throughput of goods for ocean shipping. And look, I should note here, and I noted this on my LinkedIn post this week, this is actually only one voice of an otherwise 5-person commission, right? So the Federal Maritime Commission has 5 commissioners. And just because Chairman Maffei, the appointed chairman of the FMC, has issued such strong language, the actual entire voice of the FMC is made up of the 5 commissioners. And so that's what we're going to see coming through with that third and final rulemaking that we're waiting on, the unfair, unjustly discriminatory behavior. But I can't imagine that the other commissioners aren't going to join him on this. You can't be retaliating for somebody just challenging a charge or filing a complaint. You know, if they think that something wrong has happened and they want somebody else to look at it, like the FMC, I mean, you can't retaliate for that. Not only was it specifically outlined in OSRA, but that's just bad behavior, right? So that's why I'm excited for this, because it's cracking down on the kind of bad behavior side of things. It's not necessarily me favoring one or the other. It's just basically saying, look, bad behavior, there's no place for bad behavior. We all need to work together to keep this supply chain moving. And that's what it is. So I encourage you to go read the whole press release on this. It's really worth it. It kind of gets you jazzed up seeing some of the language that Chairman Maffei is using. All right. So story number 4. We're coming back around to it. The detention and demurrage comment period closed this week on December 13th, 3 days ago. So the FMC, we've talked about this before, released their detention demurrage rule, the notice of proposed rulemaking stage, on October 13th, and it closed on December 13th. That was a 60-day comment period. If you haven't filed your comments yet, don't despair. I would still try to file them. The FMC has a pretty good record of still allowing late filed comments. Obviously, they're not going to allow it for like another month or 2 or 3. They want to get moving on all these comments, but they have quite a few comments to get through. So if in the next day or 2, if maybe you didn't know this is happening for some reason, or maybe you just thought, you know what, I want to put my info in too after reading some of these comments, go ahead and try it. Go ahead and do it. You never know. It's in their discretion to accept it or not. But certainly if you have things to say, give it a shot. Shoot your shot, guys. So we went into detail on what was in this detention demurrage notice of proposed rulemaking, this NPRM, on By Land and By Sea here. Go check out the old episode if you want to deep dive into what the language that they are proposing in this stage is. But look, we're here. We have the comments filed. I'm trudging through the whole list. And actually, if you wanna keep track of this, I have a whole series of posts that I'm doing on LinkedIn. D&D comment filing highlights. I'm using the hashtag. I don't know. I'm trying to pull it all together with some sort of organization, but hashtag D&D_comments. Look, I don't know. Just follow me on LinkedIn and you'll see, or follow me on Twitter. That's where it's getting all pushed out. But basically, as I'm reading through these comments, I'm going through and I'm kind of highlighting pieces or thoughts from the comments filed that I think are like interesting or unique or maybe thought-provoking or maybe like a cool perspective. I'm just kind of, as I was taking notes on it anyways, I thought, you know what, maybe I'll just post it out. And that's kind of what LinkedIn is anyways, right? It's kind of everybody's canvas of thoughts. So if you're interested in following along, kind of seeing the things that I find interesting or the things that I want to highlight, feel free to follow along with me. I'd love to get your feedback too. Comment on those posts. I want to know what you guys are thinking. So a few of the ones that I've highlighted this week, we're not going to go through all of them, but a few of them that I've highlighted, we'll go through here today. So the American Association of Exporters and Importers made a really interesting comment relating to detention, demurrage, mitigation, refund, and waiver. So remember, the FMC proposed a 30-day post-invoice time period for requesting a waiver or mitigation to the detention and demurrage invoice. But AAEI, so the American Association of Exporters and Importers, is putting some reins on that and suggesting that the FMC, and this is a quote from the comments, require the billing party to address the billed party's request for fee mitigation, refund, or waiver within 30 days. So it says require the billing party to address the request. That's the key word, address the request. Right now, there really isn't necessarily that piece included in the language out of the FMC's NPRM. So, I mean, really, this suggestion would help eliminate the unanswered phone calls or unanswered emails that have been reported by shippers trying to actively address the D&D charges. I think this is a really interesting suggestion. They also say that, it should be kind of within 30 days. I'm not sure if the whole thing could actually be buttoned up in 30 days, but maybe the FMC adds in a 48-hour response requirement or 1 week response requirement. And then otherwise the detention demurrage charge could be vacated. I think this is a really good point. And that 48 hour, that's not an FMC proposal currently. That's not legal advice. That's just a thought. But I think that this is a really interesting point and something that is missing from the FMC's D&D language right now is that you might submit for mitigation of this detention demurrage charge. But really, I mean, if the carrier is not interested in responding, the FMC just gave them kind of an easy out. Instead of stringing you along for 6 months now, they only have to string you along for 30 days. And I'm not saying that everybody's been doing this, but there have been some accusations, some stories, some instances that I've heard of where shippers have been trying to get a hold of carriers to dispute some of this stuff, and they've been on hold for hours. They maybe get an answer, a hello on the other line, and then they say, let me put you on hold, and they'll be on hold for like half the day. Maybe they send it to an email, and they never get a response from the email. I think that adding in some sort of response requirement, whatever that looks like, is probably a good thing here because that's part of the problem that I've been seeing. Maybe not widespread. It certainly felt a little widespread, but maybe it's not actually widespread. But I think that would really kind of ensure that the dispute mechanism, the dispute process is not just a lip service, that it actually is a process that can be used. I'm interested to see the FMC's response on this. I've often brought this up as a concern that this, this response of dispute resolution maybe just isn't as effective. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But really interesting comments from AAEI. So continuing on, the North American Meat Institute, NAMI, and the Meat Importers Council of America, MICA, they had some really interesting comments in their D&D comment filings. Two different areas that I highlighted this week. So one was on the lockout of new business due to non-payment or quote-unquote delinquency on D&D invoices. So basically what's happening, NAMI and MICA were highlighting that often other unrelated cargo is put on a hold or a lockout, and all other future business is halted until payment is received on the D&D invoice. And I've often actually heard that some of these invoices are being due on receipt. So you're almost immediately late on payment or delinquent on your payment by just receiving the invoice. They mentioned that this is a notable problem for when the receiving party may be contesting the validity of those original invoices. So basically they're saying if the D&D invoice is due on receipt, but then you want to try to challenge it, you're still in a delinquent state even while you're challenging it, meaning that delinquency state is locking out or you're putting a hold on all other businesses that shipper may be trying to engage with that carrier. That doesn't sound too fair, right? I think that's kind of what Commissioner or Chairman Maffei might have been alluding to. That might be something that might be part of that. Unjust or unfair or unjustly discriminatory practices. So essentially you're locked out of new business or shipments if you try to contest or dispute an open invoice. Kind of feels a little retaliatory for contesting an invoice, right? Because you're seen as having not paid or delinquent. Sure, you want to kind of penalize delinquency in payments of invoices, but if you make it so that the invoice is due immediately and you're immediately delinquent, that's not what delinquency is, right? Like delinquency, you would assume would be 30 days or 60 days. It's almost like maybe the FMC needs to put a net 30 on invoices and it still keeps it moving forward and you can still pay it right off the bat, but that way it pushes out that delinquency and provides for that dispute resolution period to happen. Look, if this is all true, this is a problem. And I even said in my post that this might be fodder for the next rulemaking on the horizon, the unfair, unjustly discriminatory practices. You can't, again, it's all about throughput of cargo, and you can't be locking up cargo because somebody's asking questions. So go check out those comments from Nami and Micah. They also had some interesting points on an informal survey that they had conducted of their members. And so this is kind of following along with, if you're questioning any of your invoices, your cargo gets locked up. Nami and Micah said that they found in an internal survey that they did more than 50% and sometimes as high as 80% of demurrage and detention invoices received by U.S. agricultural shippers contained inaccurate information. More than 50% and sometimes as high as 80% of the D&D invoices U.S. agriculture shippers received contain inaccurate information. If that's true throughout the rest of the supply chain, not just the meat industry, that's a major problem, and even more reason for this detention demurrage rule to really be expedited and implemented as soon as possible. But again, if you're questioning, look, they're seeing a lot of D&D invoices being inaccurate, but if you question it, now your cargo is locked up. That as Nami and Micah said in their previous comments that I was just, or the same comments, but the previous point that I just made. Look, that's not that. I mean, that's got to be close to retaliatory. I don't know that it just doesn't seem fair. Nami and Micah says that due to these high numbers associated with inaccurate invoices, they support the FMC, including all the information outlined, those 13 invoice items that came with OSRA, to really help ensure the accuracy in billing and improve business practices. That's a big number, right? All right, so go check out those comments as well. Moving along, so we have the Northwest Horticultural Council. They highlighted the need for more clarity and a prescriptive process on dispute mechanisms for disputing D&D invoices. So NHC, Northwest Horticultural Council, says that the, and I quote, current process for a shipper to dispute detention demurrage charges varies widely depending on the billing party, end quote. And due to this, quote again, FMC should provide additional details on dispute processes and require documentation to improve consistency across billing parties. Basically, they want a little guidance on how guidance for the industry on how these dispute mechanisms should be handled, because that's true. If you're going to be doing it 10 different ways and you're not really sure what you're supposed to be sending over, maybe a little just general guidance, maybe not a full required process, but maybe a little general guidance on the spirit of what the FMC envisions for a dispute resolution process. Maybe that's warranted. The dispute resolution mechanism is repeatedly cited as a huge trouble spot for shippers in addressing detention demurrage invoices, helping the industry navigate the process and thereby help eliminate non-answered phone calls or non-answered emails by the D&D party would be very beneficial to the industry. We're kind of seeing a theme here around some of the invoices and the trying to dispute them or just even ask questions. So next up, we had the national, and this is in no particular order. I just happened to go through, I think it was date-wise of when I was looking through them, but I'm kind of just, like I said, trudging through all the comments filed. I'm probably only 25 comments in. There's over 100. So these are in no way particularly highlighted. Like I said, I'm just kind of going along with them. So the National Customs Broker and Forwarders Association of America, NCBFA, I guess is the acronym, brings up an inconsistency in the D&D rule as presented regarding NVOCCs. So in their comments, NCBFA states that under the current definitions, NVOCCs, and I quote, fall within the definition of both billed party and billing party due to their unique role as ocean transportation intermediaries. Importantly, and that was end quote. So importantly, NCBFA notes that the NVOCCs sometimes both act as the shipper and are invoiced by the ocean common carrier for D&D. But then sometimes NVOCCs act as the billing party when transacting with their shipper customers. So the comments continue and mention that the FMC's proposed rule language fails to address the safe harbor provision enjoyed by NVOCCs as well. And what that safe harbor provision is, basically it exempts NVOCCs from the D&D requirements, and importantly, it limits liability for any invoice inaccuracies when the NVOCC just simply passes through an underlying ocean common carrier's invoice. I think the comments illustrate an important point that the NVOCCs and ocean transportation intermediaries are kind of a unique structure within the ocean shipping world. So the comments illustrate that the NVOCCs do not assess demurrage or detention charges, nor generate invoices for such charges pursuant to their own tariffs or non-tariff rate vehicles. So, I mean, they're not saying, look, we might issue the invoice, but it's kind of on behalf of somebody else. We're not the ones issuing the invoice. It's not our, yard space at the terminal. It's not our box necessarily. It's a really interesting point. I think that this is one that is certainly valid for the FMC to dive a little further into, is what happens with these OTIs. And maybe it just says, special rules or I don't know. We'll follow up with NVOCC. I'm not sure how they'll handle that, but I think that that's a very interesting point that NCBFA brings up and kind of identifies. And that's the whole reason why we do this, right? That's the whole point of this comment filing period. That's the whole reason why it's so important for the industry to weigh in, because the FMC is a government agency and they're just trying to help the industry, right? They're just pulling it together. And now this is why they need the industry's feedback. Are we on the right track? Is this the right direction? Are we missing something? And NCBFA's like, you missed a little bit here. You missed a little bit of this area for NVOCCs. So they also bring up difficulties associated with the 30-day invoice issuance date because of the NVOCCs sometimes passing through those D&D charges to the customer. So NCBFA is proposing an additional 30 days for NVOCCs to turn around an invoice, and therefore an additional 30 days for dispute resolution. So they also proposed a period for cure instead of an immediate vacating of payment requirement for invoices not issued within 30 days. So what they're saying basically is, look, like I said in that last little section, NVOCCs can be both billed party and billing party. And so it's not their equipment, it's not their yard, it's not their detention demurrage to be kind of charging, but they are passing it through sometimes. And so they're saying, sometimes we don't get the information for maybe 2-3 weeks, and 30 days is going to be tough for us to then turn around the information from the carriers and then send it out to the shipper customers. So they're saying we'd like an additional 30 days. Carriers have to give it to us, the NVOCCs, and then the NVOs then pass it on to the shippers with that additional 30-day requirement. They're also saying, look, because that's getting bumped out, let's bump it back on the other side too, where now we're going to have an additional 30 days, a period of cure. So basically saying, if you can't get the invoice out, to the shipper within that 30-day requirement, instead of just immediately vacating the payment, instead of just immediately saying you don't have to pay for this, because that was one of the kind of stronger language sections of the FMC's NPRM, the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking in this recent round. They are saying that maybe instead of just immediately vacating, maybe the NVOCCs could work through that with the shipper, and we'll call that the period for cure instead of just immediately vacating. I'm interested to see what the FMC says here and how they kind of handle this. Certainly the pass-through nature of NVOCCs presents unique challenges for sure, but expanding these time periods could be seen as kind of eroding the seriousness and importance of quick and purposeful deadlines. Look, right now there's no deadlines, and so we go to 30. I mean, that's pretty quick. But a lot of times, right, like D&D is required immediately, and you can't even get your goods until the D&D is paid for. But, I think that these are very valid concerns and worth an honest review by the FMC on how best to address these challenges. So then moving on, like I said, these are in no particular order. I came across a VOCC, so SM Line, an ocean common carrier. SM Line Corporation, an independent VOCC operating in the U.S. foreign trade since 2017, made some interesting observations and suggestions regarding who may receive a D&D invoice. So SM Line is proposing that the FMC, and I quote, include the consignee as a person who may receive a D&D invoice, explaining that many of SM Line's service contract counterparties are NVOCCs located in Asia, and many times, quote, their shipments involve cargo sent for import into the U.S. where a consignee or its agent takes care of all of the transportation activities at the U.S. destination, end quote. So SM Line continues and basically says that it's often the consignees that are the entities that typically cause such charges as detention, demurrage, and storage to be incurred, and they determine when cargo is picked up and equipment returned. Then they also say that consignees on the bill of lading is not likely to be a party to the service contract, and so a carrier that cannot bill the consignee will likely have no recourse at all to collect the charge. Because remember, the FMC, one of the proposals is to kind of eliminate all that periphery, and just anybody who's a direct contractual relationship will be responsible for that invoice and payment of that invoice. I mean, I think that this is interesting. And look, it continues on. So the most interesting statement SM Line makes as a conclusion to this thought is, and I quote, not including the consignee as potentially responsible for detention, demurrage, and storage would entirely eliminate the purpose of such charges to speed up the process by encouraging them to use terminals as free storage and to retain carrier equipment for any length of time. So, I mean, certainly that's what the opposite of what the FMC is trying to achieve here, right? I mean, they don't want people using terminals as storage and just keeping the container for forever. I mean, that's really not only what the FMC is trying to do, that's what the entire industry is trying to achieve. Anything that would slow down the throughput of cargo should be heavily reviewed and taken very seriously. But I guess my initial thought when I was reading through the comments, makes me wonder, is this one of those it's not us, it's them approach? I don't know. It's certainly an interesting point brought up by SM Lines. This consignee thought is something that I've seen in a few of the other comments as well. So I think that should be reviewed, is should a consignee be also included in the responsible for payment or include as a billed party? I don't know. It's really an interesting thought. So I think, if nothing else, that's another area that the FMC should write on their list of things to do. Review consignee as billed party. But again, I mean, they're trying to streamline this, so we can't just keep adding to. We have to. I think it's worth looking at and having some sort of departure from, or look, we're just going to keep it two parties. It's going to be shipper and it's going to be ocean carrier, and whoever else might be there, it's going to be responsible. It's going to be the responsibility of either the carrier or the shipper. Maybe that's oversimplifying the whole thing, but really interesting comments, right? I mean, these are really interesting. I'm really excited to see what other comments have been filed. Like I said, I'm only kind of scratching the surface here. But I'm really interested, and I'm really happy with the feedback that we've gotten on this. I think that the FMC has a lot of work ahead of it, but this detention demurrage issue is such a crucial piece to, us as an industry moving forward, right? I mean, we want inflation to go down. Inflation goes down, at least in part, by the throughput of goods, because somebody's paying for that transportation, the transportation fees and the congestion and all of that's happened over the past 2 years. And at least in part, the American public is, and really the whole world, global society. But you know what? I keep saying this. It was the Wild Wild West before. Now, the FMC is trying to keep as light a hand on it as they can. And those guardrails, I just keep saying it's guardrails. It's not super prescriptive regulatory requirements, but it's guardrails, just trying to rein in the industry and say, look, there's a lot of things that are still inside this bubble that we're trying to figure out, but we need to set the bubble somewhere. I applaud the FMC for setting it. I think that they've come up with some really interesting ideas through all of their rulemaking so far. I cannot wait for the language to come out for the unjust or unreasonable refusal to deal or negotiate with respect to vessel space. I cannot wait for the discriminatory practices language to come out. And again, that'll probably just be an ANPRM, an advance notice of proposed rulemaking. They might just be asking questions, or maybe the FMC. I mean, we saw some pretty strong language from Chairman Maffei. Maybe they have some very strong language that they're already going to send out a notice of proposed rulemaking, which again, ANPRM is just kind of general thoughts, maybe questions. The notice of proposed rulemaking is usually draft language of a rule that they want to put out, and then they want the feedback from the industry. So look, I'm going to keep working through these comments. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'll highlight some of the interesting ones in this holiday series, Captain's Log holiday series, as we continue on for the next few weeks. Maybe I'll even continue it into January just as we go through all these comments. I don't want to stay too bogged down in the comments, but There's a lot of comments, and let me help streamline them for you. So as always, the guidance here is general and for educational purposes only. It should not be construed to be legal advice directly related to your matter. If you need an attorney, contact an attorney. But if you do have specific legal questions, feel free to reach out to me at my legal company, Squall Strategies. Otherwise, for the non-legal questions, the e-learning, and the general industry information and insights, come find me at the Maritime Professor. If you like these videos, let me know. Comment, like, and share. If you want to listen to these episodes on demand, or if you missed any previous episodes, check out the podcast By Land and By Sea, wherever you get your podcasts. If you prefer to see the video, they live on my YouTube page, By Land and By Sea, presented by the Maritime Professor. And while you're at it, check out the website, themaritimeprofessor.com. Those e-courses, I'm still building them. I'm loving how they're coming together. So until next week, this is Lauren Began, the Maritime Professor, and you've just listened to By Land and By Sea. See you next time.